Our featured guest tonight is the writer and director of the brand new film Silent Night, which just hit theaters December 3rd. If you go by nothing else but the high regard with which her actors and actresses hold her in, she's going to be a director to be watching for years to come. Here to talk about her journey and her film debut feature film Silent Night is writer and director Camille Griffin. Camille, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on your show. Thank you.
So, first off, I'd like for us to get to know you guys a little bit better. Where are you from, and what was life like for you growing up?
Oh, well, that's a good question, because I think some of the inspiration of our film was my inner conflict with my own environment, which was I was brought up in Sussex, which is the southeast of England, and in quite a privileged middle-class environment. And I had a French Sicilian mother and an English stepfather, and I was sent to boarding school very young. So I on one hand had a very privileged childhood, and on the other hand, I was brought up by a lot of disturbed posh people. So most of my material has always related to challenging the dysfunctions of the middle classes.
So what would you say is your first film memory? My first was seeing Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with my parents when I was probably like 3 or 4. Scared the living hell out of me. I think I stayed away from candy for weeks. And then my next big film, I think that I remember, was Star Wars, seeing. And that kind of opened my eyes to movies forever. What would you say was your first film memory?
Well, I mean, obviously, I can't remember the very first film I watched, but I do remember that when I was growing up, I say this to my children sometimes. When I was a child, we only had 3 channels on the television, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, we don't want to hear about how miserable your childhood was." But on a Sunday afternoon, they'd play Cary Grant movies, which I always loved. But my father, my real father, was obsessed with war movies, and I think my biggest relationship with cinema growing up was watching Indiana Jones movies. I was obsessed with Harrison Ford, and then I also had this French theme in my childhood. So we'd watch French cinema. So I think my greatest influence was probably learning as a teenager about French cinema and experiencing the world through their eyes, which actually made sense to me more culturally in a way than the actual environment I was living in. But my first horror moment, I remember, was a film called The Passage with Malcolm McDowell. And I remember seeing that, and it shook me. I mean, I think he plays a Nazi and he tortures someone, and I never recovered from that. And then another film that I think inspired some of this journey was a film called Where the Wind Blows, which was Raymond Briggs. He was a famous cartoonist, and he made a film, which was a cartoon film about this older couple living in a small house during a nuclear war. And I remember as a kid discovering, can you hear my washing machine in the background?
No, I can't.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Discovering what a nuclear war was. And I remember being very young, maybe 9 or something, 8 or 9. And it horrified me, the idea that that the world wasn't safe. And I wasn't really in an environment where that was being kind of like cushioned. So I never really recovered from that, thinking, well, how does a child grow up in a world without feeling safe? And what does it mean to feel safe? And then Kira said it quite beautifully recently. She said that when you become a parent, you give birth to fear. And I think it's very, very true. That the minute I gave birth, all my neurosis kind of escalated. And it was like, how do I protect my children from the world, or from catastrophe, from tsunamis and wars and all those things. So
pandemics.
And I've always occupied a place of positivity but complete melancholia. So I think that really is, the film is a good look into my character as such. Yeah,
it's funny that you would mention, I guess, Harrison Ford and that brings in Han Solo, because I was looking through your previous work and saw at one point, did you actually get to work on Star Wars Episode 1?
Yes, I've actually got one of the clapper boards. I did some second camera work as a camera assistant, and in those days we were still using film, to shoot films, and I was unloading the magazines. And I was working in the camera truck, and the generator was plugged in, and I was in the dark room, and you had one of those little switches you turned on and off. Then I touched it, and it was no light in the truck, so I was unloading the mag. My first day on Star Wars, and which George Lucas was directing, And the camera truck driver plugged in the Jenny and the light came on and the rushes were exposed and it was hell. But I had to go on set and tell George Lucas that his rushes were being exposed. But yes, I did have that experience. I had an amazing experience working in film and television and commercials. I learned an awful lot in the camera department, which I think is a great thing for a filmmaker to have those experiences.
And now you're here releasing your debut feature film, Silent Night. Did you always know that you wanted to eventually write and direct feature films?
Oh, I've been trying for years. The British Film Industry wouldn't fund my films. I've been writing screenplays since I was 25. I'm 47 now. So I've been trying for an awful long time. And it was only when I gave up going to them, I decided when I wrote Silent Night, I'd come off the back of Jojo Rabbit, being with Roman on Jojo Rabbit. And I saw Taika Waititi using comedy. And it was a complete turning point in my life, because I was like, wow, if you use comedy, you can talk about anything. And I think my depressive material my ambitious depressive material couldn't get funded. So I came home and wrote this dark comedy, at the point of saying, okay, this is my last attempt. I've tried for so long and everyone shut the doors and they won't open the doors. And my intention was to make this film independently and not to ask the gatekeepers for their support.
And would you say that what was different about it that helped it was because of the fact that you could take this more serious type of content or subject matter and add a humorous element to it?
I think it was a mixture of two things. I think the comedy definitely helped. And I think finding a fellow filmmaker like Matthew, I'm going to try and give me some more light, who is courageous and brave. And he's more than just a filmmaker, he's an entrepreneur. And I think the message I could possibly share is write what you want to write, look at the approach to the stories you're telling, and also look for the right home for it. And I think I'd been looking in the wrong place for years. I didn't know.
Did that leave you concerned at any point in the process of making it that you were either making it too serious on one hand or too funny on the other? Did you have to find the right balance, or did you kind of know what you wanted to express all along and just...
It wasn't so much like, we have to have this, we have to have that. I knew that the comedy was going to facilitate the drama. I knew that that was absolutely necessary. And I also knew we had to transition from each act, from like comedy to comedy drama to horror, and that would be a challenge. So I knew that preserving the humor in the drama was essential.
Camille, we've got to go to a quick commercial break, pay the bills. Can you stick around till after the break?
100%.